And he, after that time, spent 3 years on the MFT, our mobile fundraising team. He later spent 5 years on Ocean Church, where he got actually to work directly with Abinu, with True Father, on that providence. He was blessed to his wonderful wife, Katsumi, in 1989 in the 1275 couple blessing. Is that in Washington?
In Korea.
In Korea. Okay, in Seoul, Korea. And he remained 3 years in Korea, where he worked. And then when he returned here to Las Vegas, some more than 20 years ago. So the last 20 years, he's been working and praying and serving our community here in Las Vegas. And I want to introduce Doug up now to give us the sermon.
Thank you. It was the summer of 1983 when I went to Ocean Church after being on MFT. And as you probably all know, a big part of Father's life is fishing, being on the ocean, and it's an aspect of his personality or his life or his life experience that maybe you don't see a lot. He's like the president or the dignitary, but there's an interesting collection of speeches. If you can learn more about Father's heart of fishing, it's in the God's Will and the Ocean. And it has speeches like the way of tuna, the way of the ocean, God's will in the ocean. And, so I'm going to tell a couple stories about my experience in Ocean Church. So when we got to Ocean Church, then the first thing is Father would teach us how to catch tuna. Ocean Church was a very personal place for Father. Especially when Father first started Ocean Church, and the men he collected he wanted real manly men. He wanted the brothers to grow beards and to not back down from fights and to be tough, to be real fishermen, to be able to stand against the other fishermen in the community. Now I came a little later, so I never grew a beard. So Father developed the technique of fishing. And in the beginning, as you may or may not know, that we were catching the giant bluefin tuna in Gloucester, Massachusetts. And in the beginning, those fish, which are huge, magnificent fish. Now, I don't know if we have any. There's going to be some pictures coming up, but you'll see that the fish are taller than the ceiling.
Wow.
And in the beginning, they were mostly trophy fish. And Americans didn't eat a lot of fish. And when I was growing up, I grew up in the Catholic Church. They had some kind of theory of indemnity where before Easter, in order to suffer and pay penance to prepare your heart for Easter, then one day a week you would have to eat fish. That's the kind of culture it was. And so this bluefin tuna, which was a red meat tuna, was never eaten, never sold. And even though in Japan or in other places it's highly prized, in America you would bring the fish back, take a photo, your trophy photo, then you had to pay a person to haul the fish away. And he would take it to the catfish plant down the street. So we were catching the tuna using hand lines. In the beginning, Father used rod and reel. That was the original way of sports fishing. It was just for excitement. But to catch them with hand lines was more of a commercial fishing way. I don't know if you ever read the book, The Old Man and the Sea, by Ernest Hemingway. In Korean, that's the Noingwa Pada, The Old Man and the Sea. And he fished with hand lines. So, Father taught us to fish. Basically, this was the theory of fishing. You have your boat, and then you would throw out chum, these little specks of free fish, free bait. When you chop the fish up and throw it over the side, it's called chum. And then on the hooks, you have your bait. So the idea is that the tuna will be following this chum line, and that your hooks will be in the chum line. So then you would observe how fast the currents go, how fast the chum fell down. And so then you would determine the depths and the distances for setting out. These are floats, and then the lines would come down and you would have your leaders. Of course, with Father and with everything, you know, life's not just about fishing. So Father talked about, you know, the world. This is what your world is like as well. Satan, everybody thinks, well, God might be a fisherman, but Father says Satan is a fisherman. And the world is filled with chum, and it's filled with hooks. And of course, this tuna fish, this is not some stupid fish, you know. This is a fish which has lived longer than, at the time, it lived longer than I had. And it didn't get that big by being stupid and not noticing what to eat, what not to eat. But at the same time, there's a desire. When desire kind of overcomes your capacity to think or reason, that's what you wanted to inspire the fish into either a frenzy where it forgets about what it shouldn't do, or if you fished with smaller fish, you probably notice this a lot. The fish will try to eat around the hook, right? Have you ever noticed when you're fishing, you feel something, you feel something, you feel something, then you pull your hook, it's empty. Okay, so fish, in general, they're not stupid. But in the same way, human beings, our life is like that. So Satan is constantly putting out chum. Okay, here's some free temptations that you can have. Follow this line of temptation, and now there's this big piece of bait on a hook. Well, you're not stupid either, but you might think, I'll just nibble around the edges. I'm not going to bite the hook. That would be wrong. I wouldn't do that. I know better than that. But I'm going to nibble around the edges, and that'll be okay. I can be forgiven later. But I just don't want to get hooked, right? Even the term hooked is an interesting word. In English, we use that word a lot, right? You can say, I'm hooked on phonics, if you want. Or you can say, you got hooked on something. It's usually used, I got hooked on drugs when I was young and I still haven't shaken it. I got hooked on... There's a lot of interesting terminology. The ladies of the night walk in the street. We call them what? We call them hookers. And a lot of times young people nowadays use the term hookup. Well, let's hook up. What does that mean? Well, sometimes it means innocent thing. But a lot of times it has the meaning, well, let's have some kind of nonchalant sexual relationship. So this is the kind of hookup which Satan is looking for, constantly fishing for all of us. There's chum in the water, and in Las Vegas you can see it driving down the street, on the billboards. There's chum in the water everywhere. There's also hooks everywhere. So you will notice that when you walk down the street, you might see something that you don't want to look at, or you don't want to move towards. But just like a fish, once it has that hook, you'll see, oh, I found myself going over that way anyway. Why did I go over this way? Somebody is pulling in. So Father was explaining that our job really is you have to get hooked by God. You really have to get a kind of hook. You know, when you fish, sometimes you hook a fish and it's just barely hooked. It's just got a little tiny piece of its lip. Sometimes somehow you just snagged a piece of its fin, right? Just barely got it. When you bring it in, you can see that it just shakes and gets loose. Well, that's not the kind of hook you want to have. You want to have the kind of hook that God can pull you in no matter what. And so if you've ever caught fish like that, sometimes they eat that hook so deep they can't get it out, right? So that's really our job. Part of the job is to get rid of all the hooks that Satan has in us, pulling us. I got hooks in my hand, or hooks in my eyes, or hooks, and you want to get hooked in your heart, deep in your heart. And that kind of hook where no matter even you go the wrong way and you're running, as soon as God pulls that line, it snaps you back and you got to come back. So that's what God is looking for. You've got to take the bait. Of course, a lot of Satan's chum might look more enticing to the fallen man, but we have to try and get hooked by God, right? So then next, after learning how to fish, we have to learn where to fish. So the fish just aren't anywhere. Of course, the ocean's full of fish, but there's spots. Now, we fished off of Gloucester and off of Provincetown, and there's two spots. There's a couple spots. What they are, they're mountains underneath the ocean. And it causes the currents and a collection of smaller food fish, bait fish, to collect on the edges of the mountain where the plant life can grow and the small fish can grow. So in the process of getting yourself a good spot, it's a very small spot actually out there. And if you notice on some of these photos, you'll see the boats all look pretty close together. When you see a fleet, you'll see that you have to anchor up. Everybody's anchoring up to try and get this good spot. Well, in the ocean, there's a lot of movement of water as well. So you might be facing this way in the morning, but when the tide swings, you're anchored up. This might be a good spot. You got your lines coming out. The fish is coming up the mountain. That's a good side for it. But later in the afternoon, the tide swings in the morning, 12-hour shifts. The tide is when the water comes in, goes out. That's when you build a sand castle on the beach, and then the tide comes in and it washes it away. Right? So in the same way, that's a movement of water. It's a current which is flowing. So your boat could then swing out, and you might be on the outside of the mountain with your lines out here, and then you really have almost no chance of catching a fish. So it's a real strategy of where to anchor up. The fish like to eat in the morning for breakfast and in the evening for dinner. So for us, fortunately, we would just follow Father around and then anchor up close to him. If you got out there when he wasn't there, you would drive with your depth finder. You would follow your heading out there. You would locate the mountain, and then you would try and figure out a good spot for yourself. So when you're out there, you're very close together. And there's times when the boats, you might have a good spot, and the boats start to swing. Well, now you're almost bumping into somebody. So now you have to pick up anchor and move. So a lot of times, Father would be right there. He was on the New Hope boat. That was the name of his boat. And it had an upper deck where he sat. Well, I joined the church basically on a kind of divine principle was really the focus of why I joined. The concept of the Messiah for me was still, I hadn't quite absorbed that, as much. Now, I'd seen Father speak, and at the time, Colonel Pock was Father's translator, a wonderful translator. really had such heart and play with Father, such give and take, that, you know, we could really absorb a lot through him. But at the same time, he liked to exaggerate, it seemed to me. And so I had heard a lot of stories about Father's incredible endurance, or he never slept, or any of these stories, which they seemed to me, they had to be exaggerated, really. So when I was at Ocean Church, I'm sitting on my boat, Father's sitting on his boat. Now we got up early in the morning, a lot of activity in the morning, setting your lines, getting the bait, chumming, setting things, deciding the currents, and this whole activity, getting ready for the morning rush when hopefully it's breakfast time, the fish are going to eat. And then there's a lull for the afternoon. Somebody might come by for lunch, but basically you're going to sit around till dinner time, and then hopefully the fish will come around again. It's outside, it's the sunshine, it's the boat's rocking. You really got nothing to do. You might want to take a nap. Right? The boats, as you know, they have no tops, they're open boats. And so I might think about sitting down and sleeping. We're supposed to try and stay busy, tend the lines, make sure a stray, smaller fish doesn't do something on the lines. Anyway, you might take a nap, you might go to sleep, say, I'm going to take a little nap, Stan. Well, Stan was my captain at the time. You might see him up there. Then you might hear a voice go, 22, no sleep. That was our number, 1 Hope 22. The Father's sitting right there watching you. So, but at the same time, I could watch Father. And he was there every day, every day, every day. 30 days in a row he'd be there. And you would watch him. He'd sit up there all day long. He was the first one down at the dock. We used to leave early in the morning, and Father would want to leave earlier and earlier. We always wanted to be the first person out. There's this theory that, you got to beat everybody. So no matter what it took, we were going to be the first ones out there. Eventually we were spending all night out there sometimes. So I would sleep on the boat. I slept in my rain gear. I wore my blue float coat and my yellow rain gear and slacks, and I had my boots on. When Father came down walked down the pier and kicked the boat and started up the engine, I just stood up. And then, I was the first mate, Stan was my captain. And we would go out every morning, earlier, 4 o'clock in the morning. And then oftentimes, it was usually 2 men on a boat, the captain and the first mate, we called them. But you would also have guests. We have all these Japanese members coming, or we have these Korean leaders coming, or we have these any kind of leaders or UTS graduates coming. There would always be somebody coming. And then a lot of times they wouldn't be there, but there was always somebody around. There wasn't always enough for every boat. And then you would ask them, so, how you doing? How was your night last? Oh, it was terrible. Father spoke till 2 in the morning. We had to get up at 3 to get out of here. And this happened every day, day in and day out, and you would watch Father. He would be sitting up there every day. And I come to realize, Father really was like this kind of Iron Man that you thought was an exaggeration, really. Anyway, so that first summer, I was on 1 Hope 22. My captain was Stan Heary and Stanislaus Heary. He was a solid Irish man. Stubborn, determined. Stan had a lot of different things going on in his life at the time, and he wasn't ready to give up yet. He'd already been a veteran, fished for a while out there, and we'd already caught a couple fish together, and we'd lost a fish together. So we were a pretty good team. We already knew what our jobs were, what to expect, how to team up with each other. And so one day we were out there, just the two of us, and we hook up. That's what we call it. You hook up. Now these fish can weigh 1,000 pounds. They can weigh 700 pounds. They can weigh more than 1,000 pounds. They're smaller tuna, of course, but out in this area, probably the smallest one you would see would be maybe 400. That would about be the smallest. So when you hook up, the line's in a basket. You have your line going out. When you hook up, the float goes down, the line goes out. The fish has the bait in its mouth, but it doesn't bite on the hook itself. It has the bait in its mouth. The line starts moving out. It's attached to a little clip, like a laundry clip almost, and it would snap. And if you hear that snapping sound, that was like the most exciting sound, that click. Now sometimes there were these little sharks called dog sharks, or sometimes they were bluefish, or other things. But when the line would go out, you would know if it was a tuna. And either way, your job was to always be ready, and then you have to set the hook. That means you grab the line and you hold it so that the line tightens up completely through all the drag of the water and everything else, and you set the hook, and the hook drives into the bone, really, and then you begin the process of trying to catch it, which is then a mad scramble because you have 5 lines going out the back. All those lines have to come in because otherwise they'll get tangled up with the one that's going out. You have an anchor line out the front of the boat, which is tied to a big red ball. You would untie it from your boat, throw it off. The anchor ball would then float. You'd come back and get it later. You're in the middle of the fleet, so everybody else who's nearby you, when the line's going by them, they have to get off their anchor ball. They have to, and then they have to pull their lines in because they'll start drifting. You can't start your motor. Your lines will get tangled. Everybody around you, whatever direction that fish is going in, now you have to pull in the lines. Pull in the lines! And so it's this mad scramble. 2 of you. One guy has set the hook and is trying to manage the line off the anchor ball. Then the boat will swing around and you'll get up on the bow of the boat and you'll fight the fish from the bow of the boat, standing there with your knees up against the bow rail holding the line. Now the hope is that the fish goes out of the fleet, because in the fleet are all these anchor lines. When the fish swims around an anchor line, then it makes a loop. It can either then tighten up, or it can come back. And if it comes back, you can't tighten it up. So then the line can get slack, and it can spit the hook. So this day, we hooked up to this fish, which was like the smartest fish ever. And all it would do was go around anchor lines, one after the other after the other. It would shoot for people's propellers. It would go around people's other lines. We were just constantly hanging upside down the boat, trying to untangle all this stuff while trying to hold the line on the other side of the anchor lines that are. And of course, you're in the middle of the fleet. All these men, there are some, the church has a fleet. There were maybe 30 boats out there, One Hope boats. But there's probably 40 other boats out there. They don't want to get off their anchor ball because that's the time. When somebody hooks up, when one's there, there's more. If you get off, and this wasn't just for fun. This is people's, right, this is money. This fish, they're big money, right? A $5,000 fish was normal, right? You could have a $10,000 fish at the end of the season when they were nice and fat, The Japanese would come with their metal straws, and they would take a core sample and they would spread it out and they would all taste it, and there would be different auction buyers. They would buy the fish and they would make bids. How much are you going to pay per pound off the boat? You know. And at the time, this was in the 80s, 83, 84, 85 while I was there. I'd seen one of our fish sold for $13 a pound. That's straight off the boat. Right? So this is big money. You got $1,000 a fish, or 1,000-pound fish, and you can sell it for $10 a pound. There's a lot of tension out there. So we're there. Our fish is constantly going after everybody's anchor line. Everybody's got to get off their line. We were close to Father at one point. He's got to get off. All his fishing gear's got to come in. It's going around just causing all kinds of problems. It's a lot of work. It's hard work holding on to the fish. And after 2 hours, we've been in the fleet for 2 hours, just causing trouble, and people are yelling at us. And we're getting exhausted. At some point, we're like, I told Stan, I said, Stan, I don't know, we can't pull this thing in. And we're right next to Father's boat. Father's just sitting there watching us. He's got no lines in, he's not fishing. And I'm like, Stan, we gotta get this in. Father can't fish like this. He says, okay, we'll call Mario. Mario was another veteran fisherman. Mario comes over, okay, he's going to come over, I'll help you pull it in. He's fresh, his arms are fresh. He's going to come over, he's driving over on his boat, grab a hold of our bow rail, stands on the other side, holding on to the fish, grabs onto the bow rail, he's just stepping over. He's got 1 foot on our boat, 1 foot in his boat. Father stands up, and he says, go away! No help! So then Mario takes his foot off and he said, sorry, Father said. And then at that moment, that fish just took off. It left the fleet and it just went for miles. It's pulling this big boat. It went so far that we couldn't see any of the boats. At the end, we didn't know where we were. And as we were being pulled out, I'm holding on to this line and wondering, what's going to happen? Are we going to die? So I'm holding on to the line, standing on the front of the boat, and it's just pulling us through the water. But you can feel some vibration through this line. You can feel the fish's spirit, you can feel it. And so of course you have some constant communication with this fish the whole time, whether you're fishing. These are just magnificent creatures. So I could start to feel it shaking. I could start to feel it's getting a little bit weak. It felt like it's losing its spirit, And then this kind of rogue wave hits us, knocks me over. I fall against the bow rail. I drop the line.
Oh my God.
Well, I grab it right away. And now I feel the fish's vibration feels like, oh, you're getting weak, then I'm going to win. So this goes on for a long time. And we're getting exhausted, totally exhausted. At one time, we knock over our water. We have no water. One of the jobs is the fish will try and swim straight at you, because then if it can turn the hook, turn it in its mouth, the hook can come out. So it's trying to use the water pressure to turn that line and swim straight at you. At that time, you have to pull the line in as fast as you can. But all this line on the deck is it's dangerous, because then it's going to come and then it's going to go back the other way.
They go together.
Right? So one of the jobs, one man's fighting the line, fighting the tuna. The other man is constantly managing the line, constantly feeding it into this basket as fast as you can. But it has to be done well, otherwise when it goes out, if it's a tangle, you get a big blob go out, and then you... So this is the constant battle. This fish is coming at us and away, at us and away. And when it goes away, your job is to try and hold it as hard as you can to make it rise in the water. And the tunas, they're not like fish that like to jump out of the water. They run deep, so you have to really force it to come up. And we're getting beat up, really. You know, both of our hands at this point are just bleeding because the line has shredded our gloves and your muscles, and it's getting very difficult. So at one point, this commercial fisherman comes by, and he knows he's a friend of Stan's. He says, "Hey, we already caught our fish for the day. You guys want me to pull that in for you?" He says, "You look like you can't pull anything in." He says, "You want me to pull that in for you?" And Stan says, "Sorry, our lead boat said we gotta pull it in ourselves." So he says, "Okay, see you later." So we're fighting this fish, and finally, over the hours, it's coming up. And when you get to the smaller end of the line, the rope's getting smaller. You use a fat rope at the end, or at the beginning of and it gets smaller towards the hook. And it eventually goes to some people use piano wire, but we were using a thin aircraft cable, a wire cable. And when you're holding on to that, it's very thin, and you have to hold it with your hands. And you're tempted to wrap it around your hand to give you some extra power. But the problem is, and it's happened, you wrap it around your hands, and when the tuna runs, then it would just, right? So there was a Japanese brother that I watched him get his fingers popped up.
Oh my goodness.
And other people would get, they would, on the thicker rope, if they would wrap it around to try and hold it, they would either get yanked off the boat, and then a variety of different options. They either hang on until the fish turns, or somebody can cut the line behind them, or just, a few different experiences like that. So we knew you can't do that, but no longer we cannot hold the line anymore. Can't squeeze my hand closed. So you have it around your body. We were holding our hands together like this, trying to hold it. Eventually we got the fish high enough where you could see it. And now it's making the circles, coming up closer, and then you're going to harpoon it. Well, the harpoon is a thicker line and a big spear-shaped head that will, once you stick it in, then it disengages from the harpoon pole, and then the fish will run. The problem is, if you miss, the fish, even though it's almost dead, almost gonna give up, almost wanna quit, if you miss it with a harpoon, then it goes, right, goes into panic mode. So Stan's holding the line, and I have the harpoon. Okay, he says, you got one shot. Right? He says, if you miss it, I don't think we can ever pull it back in. So, fortunately, we harpoon the fish. It runs, but now you have a thick line in its side, and you can pull it back in. Finally, we pull the fish to the side. The fish is still coming after us, coming out of the water, chomping its jaws. And I really felt like this fish is coming to eat us. It had wanted to kill us and then eat us. So then we finally relax. We're so focused on what we've been doing that we don't notice anything else going on. And we said, you know, there's all these boats around, start applauding. There's these like people who just go out for, not for fishing, just for going out for a ride. There were like 8 boats around us. They've been watching us for a while. And then the guy says, hey, you guys need any help? And, you know, I said, well, we already caught it. I can't close my hands anymore. Yeah, come over here. So we let him get on the boat, put the rope through. You run the rope through in order to tie it to the side of the boat to take it back. Anyway, so now we're going to head home. Well, we don't know where we are. We can't see anything. We're so now we know, okay, if we head west, eventually we'll see land and then we can just follow the coast. We know what the coast looks like. And we call up the fleet. Hey, does anybody know where we are? Do you know which direction we headed off? And they give us some bearings. So we start heading a little bit west and a little bit towards that. And then eventually we can see the fleet off on the side. And you raise a white flag up the top. Well, Stan is completely beat. I'm driving the boat with my elbows because I can't touch anything with my hands. And so then the tradition is normally you drive by the fleet. Father's boat is somewhere in the fleet. You don't go disturbing anything. You just drive by. As you pass by, you bow. You know, this is your offering. Make a bow. So that's what we're going to do. We're outside the fleet. We slow, you know, you're driving slow because you have this fish attached. You bow. And then we hear over the radio, "Oh, Father wants to see you." Okay? We start heading towards the fleet. And Father's on top of the boat, standing up, waving his arms, clapping his hands. Then he starts yelling, 1,000 pounds, he says. It's 1,000 pounds. He's jumping up and down, clapping his hands. You know, I'd never seen him like that. I've never seen him like that. And so we go, get closer. He's so excited, so happy. Calls us to the boat, and we're just completely, before, you know, we were like 2 dead guys trying to get home, you know. And then when you're there with Father, he's so happy, so excited, you know, comes down, wants to say hi, wants to talk to you, and, you know, all that pain and goes away, right? And he wants to give us food, and he wants to give us drinks, and he wants to, you know. Then eventually we go away. So he would ask us, you know, wow, how do you feel now? You know, who harpooned the fish? You know how long it took? We had no idea. How long did it take? We have no idea. 6 hours, he said. It took 6 hours. We're like, oh boy, we're tired. So then as we drove away, you know, I told Stan, I said, you know, this is really the way you want to die. You know, you want to die when you could go to heaven, and Father's like that. You know.
That's right.
So I have a little quote from Mother's speech I want to read. She says, we don't know what will happen to us or when. At any rate, when you're truly blessed, you're truly in a blessed position. When you go to the next world after fulfilling this responsibility, who do you think will be the first person to welcome you in heaven? I'll read that a little bit in Korean. It says, 이 책임을 하고 갈 때 제일 먼저 하늘에서 반겨주신 분이 누구겠어요? The Father would say, 왔구나. Oh, you've come. 그래 어머니 모시고 참 수고했다. Oh, you've served mother so well. You worked so hard. 일해 주시면 얼마나 좋겠어요. And that's what mother says. She says, oh, you've done great work in serving mother. I remember you. 내가 너를 기억한다. If Father says this to you, how wonderful would that be? She says. You should work with such determination. So, I'm going to have a word. This is a word Mother uses all the time. It's in Korean. And it's kind of related to this. It's this Saseng Kildan Jolyak Tugu. You know, Saseng is life and death. Kildan is a determination or a decision. So life and death determination, life and death attitude. Mother says this almost in every speech. This is like a little term, a phrase which she uses, right? Jolyak Tugu means to invest all of your energy. Now, you know the numbers, right? Ili, Sam, Sa. Sa is the number 4. But also this is Sa. Sa is also death. So, if, you know, in Korea, they don't have a 4th floor in there. We don't have a 13th floor. Well, that's, maybe you can remember that word. And sing, you probably have sung this happy birthday, 생일 축하합니다. This is life. Saseng Kildan is your life and death determination. Alright, so that's, maybe I'll just tell you one more since I have a little Korean lesson there. I'm going to tell you one more little story. The time I met Father in Ocean Churches. I had started studying Korean after I heard him speak sometime. And then in Ocean Church, I fished for 2 years. In the 3rd year, I worked on the mechanics team. And at the time, I was able then to drive into Boston once a week, and I took some private lessons. So I was studying Korean, but I was always a little struggled with some of the concepts that people presented about learning Korean. Oh, you have to learn Korean because it's the one world language, or you have to learn Korean because it's the language of the spirit world, or you have to learn Korean because otherwise you can't understand anything Father says. Well, I struggled with those kind of concepts, but anyway, I was studying a little. One day, this big storm came. I was a guest on the boat. I was a mechanic, and we got to go out still every once in a while. And a big storm came. We were in Provincetown, and all the captains and first mates were going to take their boats into Provincetown and run for shelter. And then all the guests got on the New Hope boat. That was Father's boat with Father. And then they were going to head back to Gloucester for the harbor. And while we were on the boat, it was almost all Japanese leaders and Korean leaders, and just maybe 2 Western members, maybe 2 or 3. And I was sitting right in front of Father. I mean, I have a hard time sitting on the floor anyway, but I'm right in front of him. He's sitting on a chair. I had to keep my legs pulled back so I wouldn't kick him, you know, that's how close I was. And he spoke in Korean and he spoke in Japanese for a while. The waves are getting rougher and we're still going and he's talking. Then once he finishes that, he just falls asleep. And about 5 minutes later, he wakes up and he looks at me and he says, "Why do you study Korean?" I never said anything to him. I never said a Korean word. You know, I was still learning the alphabet. Why do you study Korean? I didn't know what to say. I didn't say anything. I just sat there. And he says, it's not because it's the one world language. It's not because it's the language of the spirit world.
Wow.
He says, you have to study Korean for unity. He says, all these Japanese members, he's speaking in English still. He says, you all have to learn English and you have to learn Korean. And all you Korean leaders, you have to learn English and Japanese. He says, if we can't talk to each other in our church, how are we going to make unity? And he fell asleep again.
I can see it.
But I just found that, how did he know what was going on inside of my mind? You know, I wasn't thinking about that. It wasn't even something I was remotely thinking about. But to me, it was just another little story about Father's nature, Father's character and care. Even in the moment when he could have just slept, I mean, but still he wanted to give something. Well, that's my story. I hope you appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's pray. Dearest Heavenly Parents, we're so grateful for your love and unending guidance. Our Father has truly poured his heart out. Every day he was alive, he sought to pour his heart out that we could know you and that we could connect to you. Father, we want you to be in control of our lives. We want you to be able to pull us and to guide us. We're so grateful for our true mother. Such determination to be serving our true Father. And we know that when our mother goes to the spirit world, what incredible welcoming true Father would give. Nothing could be greater than that moment. We want to strive in our lives to be the people who can be welcomed by true Father with joy, with such excitement. Nothing could be better than that. Father, we're so grateful for our true parents. Our true Father's life and heart is so vast and so many-layered. It's really so deep, like the ocean, hard to perceive. We're so grateful for the chance to have been able to see our true parents. Heavenly Parents, we're so grateful for your never giving up on this world. And we pray that we can become the people who can make it possible for you to share your love with this entire world. I thank you and I'm grateful for this opportunity. I pray this in the name of Doug and Katsumi, Bless Central Family. Adieu.